Increasing numbers of Republicans lining up against Wyoming Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney after she again called out former President Trump for promoting the big lie, the false claim that the 2020 election was somehow stolen from him. Cheney is the third most powerful Republican in the House. She is formerly chair of the party conference, and now some party members want her removed from that leadership post. This morning, the Republican House leader Kevin McCarthy was caught on a hot microphone just before a live appearance on Fox News. Folks at the website Mediaite posted the edited sound, which does not include the original question he was asked.
I think she's got real problems. I've had it with. It's, I've lost confidence. Well, someone just has to bring the motion, but I assume that will probably take place.
Moments later, when he actually appeared on camera, McCarthy gave a very different assessment on television about Cheney, starting with whether she was under fire because of her vote to impeach Trump.
No, there's no concern about how she voted on impeachment. That decision has been made. I have heard from members concerned about her ability to carry out the job as conference chair, to carry out the message. It's more concerned about the job ability to do and what's our best step forward, that we can all work together instead of attacking one another.
A spokesman for Liz Cheney later responded with this statement, quote, "This is about whether the Republican Party is going to perpetuate lies about the 2020 election and attempt to whitewash what happened on January 6. Liz will not do that. That is the issue." House Republicans could vote to remove her from her leadership position as early as May 12. You may recall she survived a similar challenge just earlier this year. Meanwhile, the former president may soon have a new place to post what he's thinking. Today, he launched what can only be described as a kind of old-school blog on the web to get his message out to his followers, something that has become more difficult after his post-insurrection bans from social media platforms. Part of that could change tomorrow when an independent oversight board put together by Facebook rules on whether Trump's account at Facebook should be reinstated. That possibility has raised concerns among some House members.
I think it would be a mistake to let him back on this early. There's still a threat in terms of the big lie. He's still promoting that. But a few months after the January 6th incident just seems too soon to me. And I do think it would allow him back on in a way that could be dangerous.
With that from Congressman Ro Khanna, let's bring in our leadoff guests on this Tuesday night. Yamiche Alcindor, White House correspondent for the PBS NewsHour, contributor to this network, who just today was named as the new host and moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Dr. Irwin Redlener, the founding director of Columbia's National Center for Disaster Preparedness, who advises us on public health. And we welcome to the broadcast tonight Denver Riggleman. He's a former Republican congressman for the Commonwealth of Virginia. His last day in office was 3 days before the January 6th riot. He was one of a handful of House Republicans who immediately acknowledged Joe Biden's 2020 election win. Indeed, Congressman, by welcoming you to the broadcast, I'd like to begin with you tonight and a quote from a Wall Street Journal editorial just written and posted this evening. This gets your attention. This is about Donald Trump losing in 2020. Republicans should find a way to speak this truth to voters in 2022 and quickly turn to running on an agenda for the future that will check Mr. Biden and his cradle-to-grave entitlement state. Purging Liz Cheney for honesty would diminish the party. Congressman, does that about speak for you?
It does. I tell you, I don't think anybody, though, is going to run away from Donald Trump right now. If you're looking at the polling, if you're looking at the fundraising, it seems like he's still the one that everybody sort of gravitates to, especially when you see the conga line or the pilgrimage down to Mar-a-Lago. But I think right now Liz did something I think that was crossing the political line. We can talk about polling. We can talk about fundraising. We can guess that the internal polling looks bad for Liz or looks very good for stop the steal or election integrity language. But what she did is she hit them right squarely in the self-preservation button. And that was the issue when she opposed, or she actually agreed there should be a January 6th, commission, and she opposed McCarthy on that. And I think that's where it got personal, because I think McCarthy's trying to protect some of those members, maybe from being subpoenaed, maybe from himself being subpoenaed. And I think that's when it went sideways, Brian, is when she went against Kevin on the January 6th commission.
Yamiche, if you can take a baby step back and tell us how it is that things have reached the stage where a bedrock conservative veteran member of Congress from an incredible Republican political pedigree is now the enemy in her party.
Well, taking that step back, Brian, means really getting to the heart of this, which is that Liz Cheney's sin, the reason why Republicans are turning on her, is because she will not lie about an election. She will not say that the president who was legitimately elected is actually the legitimate leader of this country. Instead, Republicans want to feed to their voters this lie that President Trump began, and that they, of course, took all the way through and spread in so many different states. Kevin McCarthy here, Leader McCarthy here, is saying that this is about Liz Cheney not following the message of the Republican Party. But what he's not saying in that same message is that the message of the Republican Party is about saying that this election was stolen from President Trump, when they know that that's not true. They know that that's not true because Republican secretaries of states told them it's not true. They know it's not true because the Attorney General said that the former Attorney General Barr, who was a staunch advocate for former President Trump, said he did not find any massive voter fraud. But because Liz Cheney, and just standing there and telling the truth, is in some ways a contrast every single day to Kevin McCarthy, who is having to lead a Republican Party that has to go in this direction of conspiracy theories down this road with their voters, and is not able to really just say to their voters, we lost this election, we can win the next one. That is where we got here. And of course, we're only 118 days past when a mob stormed into the Capitol because of that lie. So because that sentiment that got so many people to break into the heart of our democracy is continuing to spread itself all over this country, Liz Cheney found herself in this position where she is, at this point, it seems the fix is in. It's what lawmakers are telling reporters, and she's already has contenders calling people around her membership to try to run against her.
A question about Republican leader McCarthy. I take what you said about the conga line down to Mar-a-Lago. At least they own it. They're open and public about it. But is this a straight up hit job by McCarthy? Is he doing this to please Donald Trump, in your view?
Well, he has to right now. I guess, everything's about follow the money, even in politics. And when you look at the funding lines that the Republicans are, I would say, depending on for 2022, that all leads to Mar-a-Lago. And I've said that so many times that 2022 is through Mar-a-Lago, especially with the GOP and what they have to do to actually win that. They believe that they have to do that based, again, on election integrity, stop the steal, and some of the things that they've been following, which they're obviously untrue. But, and that's what's happening to Liz right now. Brian, Liz is going to probably lose. Elise Stefanik's probably going to be in there, somebody like that who's shown appropriate loyalty to Trump. But I'm going to say this. I think Liz doesn't care as much as people think. I think she's doing the right thing. I think she has a clear conscience. And I think her give a damn is busted right now. I know mine is. I remember when I was speaking on the floor against QAnon, I was the only one down there doing that. I remember walking out and I was incredibly alone. I know what that feels like, but you get to a point where you think that facts have to win over fantasy, and that your service to the people is well over your service to a party or to politics that's gone completely off the rails. What scares me, though, is that this message is working in a lot of America, especially for the GOP in 2022. And my fear is that message will propel them to the majority just on that type of fantasy. And again, as somebody who still identifies as a conservative, it's very difficult for me to get my arms around when fantasy wins over facts and when politics win over people. It's just an awful thing.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.